The pivotal shift was just, yeah, I think it just, I got to a point with so many employers where I just, I was working 24/7 in a lot of these jobs that were logistics related, because usually trucks were operating and they were going all across Canada, US. And it was a 24/7 job. And so, I mean, the wheels just never stopped. And so you would get calls at 4 in the morning, midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. And so I was used to working pretty hard at a lot of these jobs. And, in every single job, like, people would make me some sort of promise, or again, there was different things that were told to me that were gonna, come out in these jobs, but they never did. And so again, it was just some of those heartaches that kind of led me to like no other choice. I just couldn't work for, at that point, it just seemed like I couldn't work for another employer. So that was like the biggest pivot moment where I'm like, okay, what do I do now? I've had, I think it was like 3 or 4 really bad experiences up until that point. And every time I put, 110% into every job that I went into. And, I just figured, okay, well, I just can't work for anybody anymore. And somebody, even at that point where I was making this pivot, somebody came around and said, "Hey, Damon, I'm going to offer you a $80,000 salary plus a brand new Mercedes, and come work at my company." And I was like, that's such a generous offer. And inside my heart, I just felt like, well, I haven't done anything for you. Why would you want to pay me that much money? And this was a lot of money back in the day, over 20 years ago now. And so I guess he saw something inside of me, but I had been broken so much by these other experiences that I could not go through that again. And so no matter what somebody put in front of me, I just was not willing to go through it. And entrepreneurship was a route where it was pretty much working for free. Like there was no built business. There was starting from scratch. And I wanted to do it ethically, which was not go after any of my previous employers' business. And so I wanted to create it from scratch and do it in a way where, again, how could I do it in an honest way, ethical way? And that was the pivot to, again, just having peace of mind was the main reason to open up into entrepreneurship, so I didn't have to go through a painful experience again.
What was, before we get in fully and dive into your entrepreneurial journey, is what was one lesson that you learned from other people not following through?
There's a concept of you could own 100% of a grape or 10% of a watermelon. And so I realized that if any of those previous employers valued the employee and saw that their business was growing exponentially, maybe treating that employee, or again, the value of employees, that's one of the lessons there is, again, knowing the value of a human asset. And I realized that a human asset is more valuable as a resource than anything else that you could buy within your company. And so for me, that was number one. Number two was, again, knowing how to treat those people once they were in your company and recognizing them. And a lot of the companies that I went to had major downfalls after I left. And so I got to see that from the outside. But whenever I left the company, I made sure that they were left in the best possible situation. And again, there was no malice that was there towards the companies that I departed from. One of those employers, I made a manual for on how to run their business before I left. And I said, hey, you know what? Let this manual serve to help anybody else that's in my position. And no one asked me to make it. But it was just something that, again, I didn't want to leave anybody in a situation where they would have to face that. My other employer, I worked there for another year because he's like, Damon, the only reason I grew this company is because you were in it. And so I actually hired about 4 or 5 different people in my position. And until I showed the employer that, hey, I'm hands off now, and these people are all doing my job for me, he let me leave.
Wow.
So there was no malice there. But then I realized like what that human asset capital is in a company. And even that employer, we grew that from, 1 million a year to over 24 million a year within 4 years. And within 1 year of me leaving, he had sold that company and the company went bankrupt,
Wow.
because as soon as other people started leaving in that company, he didn't know how to put it back together. And so, the one option was to sell it off. And then even while they were still selling it, it collapsed. And so, yeah, I got to see a lot of these things from the outside and realize, hey, you know what, if you have a good employee, try to keep them, right? You're gonna have to hire four or five just in case, if you lose that good employee, but treat people well, right? So that's one of the biggest lessons that I could, kind of share with everyone is just understand that, you don't have to own 100% of something, because if there's 100% of nothing, then you have nothing left,
Yeah,
right? But at the same time,
absolutely.
yeah, so 10% of the watermelon, again, a lot of structures that companies have nowadays to become successful is they do offer, whether it's really good pay packages or equity within a company if it doesn't have, if it's not able to afford those high salaries. There's different solutions that can be made to make sure that everybody wins in that situation.
Yeah.